So we are doing this event in an effort to try and engage the community in this virtual world that we have going on. And we're very excited today to be joined by our colleagues in Spain. Laura Gatz, who is a Rutgers study abroad on-site coordinator, and Chef Steve, who you will hear from shortly. So I do quickly just want to go over some, I guess, ground rules is the best way to say it. We are very excited to hear directly from the audience. So we're hoping that you will either raise your hand, which you can do by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and clicking raise hand, or typing a question in the chat box. So if you ask a question out loud, we will have that relayed to the chef. And if you are typing the chat in the chat box, either I or Laura will send that question over to the chef. Questions in Spanish will be encouraged, but those will be answered by Laura. Questions in English, I will try to field as well. I also wanted to let everybody know that if you would like to turn on any type of subtitle, you can go again down to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click live transcript, show subtitle. So if for any reason you need the extra support there, we encourage you to do that. So I would at this point like to go ahead and transfer or send the baton to Laura to introduce Rutgers Global and to introduce our star chef. Laura, send it to you.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Valencia. I hope you're all ready to start cooking after watching the preparatory video. My name is Laura Gatz. I'm the resident director of the Rutgers Global in Spain program. And just to give you a little very brief introduction to that program, we have had a study abroad program here in Valencia for almost 30 years. For 30 years, students from Valencia have been going to New Jersey. Students from Rutgers have been coming here to Valencia. A lot has changed in that time. One thing that hasn't changed is the fact that we have a very strong food culture. In fact, in Valencia, we've had a strong food culture for 2,000 years. I think the first export product of Valencia was Roman fish sauce about 2,000 years ago. But in the last couple of decades, we've seen a real blossoming of the food scene here because there's been a lot of talent attracted to the city. And one of those people is Steve Anderson, who's going to walk you through two of his recipes from his restaurant, the Mackin Cafe. If you're interested in more, this is a book that he's written, a co-authored with his sister, Bridget Anderson. It's called Burma, Food and Conflict. And it is the history of Burmese cooking and the history and culture of Myanmar seen through the lens of one family. It's a delightful trip through that country's history.
I want to make a couple of special thank yous. First of all, to our camera team from Equipo 14 here in Valencia, Aitor, Begonia, and Robert. Thank you so much. I don't know if this is the right expression to use in this context, but every TV chef should eat his heart out. This is quite a sentiment, quite a setup we've got here. And of course, I want to thank Steve for doing this for us because I think it's incredible. And a little bit of a spoiler alert. Last week at the technical rehearsal, I got to have some takeaway. I got some little doggy bags of the food that Steve made, and I think you're going to very much enjoy your lunch today. So as we say here in Valencia, bon profit, and also happy cooking with Steve Anderson. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Valencia. And thank you very much, Laura, for that very warm welcome. It's a warm day here in Valencia. I hope you're having a nice warm day in New Jersey or wherever else you are. Anyway, welcome, everybody. A special welcome if we have any Burmese viewers or people who are living outside Burma, who are Burmese or who have family in Burma. We spend a very, very special and very warm welcome to anybody from there. And just to remember that we are with you, the people of Burma. We're going to show you two recipes today. I hope you've done your mise en place. I hope you've prepared all the ingredients. We're going to do the biryani, a cauliflower biryani. You'll remember that biryani is a dish that comes from India, but like all food, it's the subject of a long and complicated journey because really its origins are with the Persians. It's a rice-based dish, but with lots of spices. And it's usually made with lamb in India, but we're going to make it with cauliflower. So it'll suit the vegetarians among you, even the vegans among you, because this dish is fine for vegans and vegetarians. And then we've also got our Burmese pomelo salad. This is a dish that I can't remember where I picked it up in one of my many visits to Burma, but there we were making it with those great big Burmese or Southeast Asian pomelos, you know, those great big white ones, which are kind of 5 times the size of these. These are local pomelos. They're pink pomelos from Valencia, and we'll be using those because, as with all food, when you can't get an ingredient that maybe is used in one country, well, you have to adapt the dish to suit the ingredients that you have available. And I remember my great-grandmother, Markin, who figures there on the cover of our book. Markin was a Mon woman born in Moulmein in Burma. And she lived for a while in England because she married my great-grandfather, who was an English judge. And for a while they lived in England. She never learned English. And she would try and make Burmese dishes in England. And when she needed something that was similar to hibiscus flower, which has an acidic taste, she couldn't find hibiscus flowers. And so she used to use rhubarb in her salad. So I thought that was a kind of really good example of how when you take food from one country to another, when food travels across borders, it changes and it adapts to the local conditions. Okay, without more further ado, let's get started with our cauliflower biryani. I told you you'd need a pot. This is the pot you're going to need, okay? And we were going to measure out rice. Now, this is enough rice for 3 people, probably. Even, in fact, if you're kind of fairly generous, you can probably get 4 portions out of it. But this is a generous cup of rice. And what we're going to do, it's basmati rice. What we're going to do is we're going to pour water over it, and we're just going to let it soak there for about 10, 15 minutes, okay? And while that's soaking, I'll run you through the ingredients in the biryani. Cauliflower, of course. We've got some onion, ginger, and garlic for a to stir fry. All kind of stews and rice dishes start off, even in Valencia, when you make a paella, they start off with what they call a sofrito, a stir fry. And the stir fry in this case is onion, ginger, garlic, and then spices. And the spices, we're going to use powdered garam masala, which is a mixture of spices. You may have paprika, you may have chili powder, you may have both, like me. Chili powder is obviously much more spicy, so chili powder in small quantities and paprika in larger quantities. Turmeric. And then we've got whole spices, and I said you didn't need all of these, but try and get at least 2 of them. So I'm using today cumin seeds, coriander seeds, a little bit of star anise, green cardamom, black cardamom, and cinnamon. I've managed to get hold of some curry leaves. I'll confess to you, these are not fresh curry leaves, they're frozen curry leaves. Curry leaves freeze very well. I prefer the frozen ones to the dried ones. I think they have much more flavor. If you didn't manage to get curry leaves, we said you could substitute it with a laurel leaf, a bay leaf, okay? And then I've got some small fresh green chilies as well. You may not have been able to get fresh green chilies. Maybe you've got a dried red chili. Well, don't worry, use that instead, okay? Because we have to adapt to what we've got available. I've also got some vegetable stock. The quantity of vegetable stock, you remember, is the same as the quantity of rice. So it's a cup of rice to a cup of vegetable stock. Okay, let's get started. The first thing we need to do for this biryani, and this is absolutely essential, and you've probably already prepared this because I told you to prepare it, but then we realized that actually we had more than enough time to do it ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slice that onion nice and finely, because what I want to do is I want to fry it very, very slowly so that it gets really, really golden and really brown, okay? Now that stage of cooking the onion until it's really brown is important. In some dishes, you may want to cook onion until it's just translucent. But in this dish, you need it to be really brown, not burnt, but really brown, okay? Right, so let's get started with that. We're going to pop that onto the flame, cross our fingers that this works, which it does. Oh, that was my one moment of anxiety with this audition as a television chef. I'm using sunflower oil. You could also use peanut oil or rapeseed oil. You're using something neutral, okay? And we're going to heat up the oil, and we're just going to drop into there our onion, and we're going to start frying it, okay? And it's a slow fry. Just going to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't burn, and just leave it there to do its thing. And meanwhile, you will have prepared your cauliflower already. What little faith I have in my excellent students, because of course I was thinking maybe you won't have enough time to prepare it during the course. Well, I decided that I wasn't going to pre-prepare the cauliflower. You may have it prepared, but I'm just going to slice it up because I'm just so darn clever. I'm going to be able to talk and slice cauliflower at the same time, which is more than most men can do. Right, so let's just try and... I want to kind of keep as much of the cauliflower as possible. So sometimes, you know, you'll have your little stem of cauliflower like that, and people will say, oh, well, just cut off those little florets like that. And then I'll say, well, what about all this bit? You know, we're going to just throw it away. So, well, don't cut off the florets like that. Cut them off longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep a nice bit of stem, and we're going to cut them with nice long stems, okay? And that way there's less waste. Because of course, we're very conscious of the fact that food must not be wasted. My mum, who, although she was very small, lived through the Second World War. And I think that generation were very conscious of food waste, as I'm sure are many people who've lived through more recent wars. And I think we need to remind ourselves of the importance of not wasting food. Right, so we're just going to prepare that cauliflower. We won't need all of it, so you've got enough left over there to make some cauliflower cheese on a different day. But we're going to fill this bowl with cauliflower, and meanwhile, our onion is singing away there nicely. So we'll just let it sing. And off we go. Laura, please feel free to interrupt me with questions, if there are any, okay? Can you see on camera Aitor the onion? Yeah? Can everybody see that? Okay. So can you see what I want it to do is I want it to kind of, you see it bubbling away nicely there, but I don't want it to start burning at any point. So for those of you perhaps who are less used to cooking, just keep it moving because there will be hotter spots in that pot, okay? And there will be bits where it'll catch and burn faster. So just keep it moving every now and then. Keep an eye on it, okay? Are we getting feedback? Well, I'll just keep on carry on talking, Lauda, and if you manage to get a question, just talk over me. I'm just going to carry on slicing up my cauliflower here while that onion's doing its thing. Garam masala, by the way, which is this spice that we talked about. Garam masala is a mixture of different spices. It has cumin in it. It has cinnamon in it. It has anise. What else does it have? It has coriander. The recipe will vary from one place to another, but really it is that mixture of spices. And one of the characteristics of garam masala is it's a nice spice to add at the end of cooking. So if you find your food is lacking a little bit of spiciness, you can stir in a bit of garam masala at the end. But here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in at the beginning. And the reason why I chose it really was because I didn't want you all to have to go out and buy those little jars of spices and buy 20 or 30 different spices and make a mixture of spices just to do this curry. So to simplify things, we've used garam masala as a way of kind of putting lots of different spices in without having to invest in all those little pots of spices, which will then sit on your shelf for years and years.
Steve, I have somebody has asked a question, and it's a good question because you say garam masala. Well, how do I know what's authentic? And that brings a question about when we talk about authentic, we talk a lot about Eastern and Southeast Asian food, and it's kind of a code word for cheap street food. What do you think about that, about authenticity in spices and food? And how do we view this in Europe and Spain when we talk about authenticity in food?
I'm very glad you asked me that question, because authenticity is one of those words which, and I think it's probably my beloved sister Bridget's influence. Bridget, as you mentioned earlier, Laura, is the co-author of our book, and she's professor of migration, mobilities and citizenship at Bristol University, and a true expert on all things to do with authenticity. But she's certainly taught me a lot about, well, we've had interesting discussions about authenticity and what makes something authentic. Because really, when people talk about authentic, for instance, in Valencia, they talk about paella. Is it an authentic paella? And that begs the question, well, what is an authentic paella? People say, well, an authentic paella, you know, it has to have rice and it's something that was discovered in Valencia, and it's a true Valencian dish. And I wouldn't dare say that it's not a true Valencian dish, but I'd also say, well, hang on, but paella would never exist if it didn't, if the Arabs hadn't brought rice to Valencia. So we're talking about something which really couldn't have been authentic 1,000 years ago because there was no rice in Valencia then. Or it couldn't have been authentic before Colon went off to the Americas and brought back peppers and tomatoes, because there are paprika, or Valencian paprika, which is called pimenton, and there are tomatoes in paella. So what really makes something authentic? And it's a word that I kind of tend to avoid now, because it actually goes a little bit against this philosophy of ours of decolonial food, because the whole point of the food that we make in my restaurants is that it depends on cultural encounter, because we believe that actually it's through those encounters, it's through people meeting each other and sharing and learning together and showing each other their different ways of cooking, their different cultures and their different histories, that actually food evolves. Food is not something that's static. And I'm sure that the way we're eating today is quite different from the way that we ate 20 years ago. And it's probably very much to do with the fact that Spanish society is perhaps much more open now to the rest of the world. People travel a lot more, certainly. And so Spanish food has evolved, and we've seen that. We've seen that through, if you look at the 3-star Michelin chefs today, somebody like David Munoz. David Munoz obviously has a foundation in traditional Spanish cooking, but he's also opened up his mind to all of the influences from all around the world, and that's helped him to create a new style of Spanish cooking, but which is authentic, I'm not sure, but certainly open to the rest of the world and open to cultural encounters. So that's really what we believe in. It's not a kind of it's not something we've invented. Obviously, it's really the way that food is moving. Food is moving in that direction, and it's moving towards a constant evolution. You know, it's constantly changing. So we need to be open to that, and we need to do it in a fair way. You know, we need to be conscious of the fact that our resources are limited, for example. So we need to work so that our food is consumed in a responsible way. We need to encourage our customers in restaurants to eat perhaps less meat and more pulses and more vegetables, and to eat more food that's grown locally. You know, it sounds a bit strange coming from a restaurant that serves food from Southeast Asia, but actually most of our ingredients are local. The spices not, but the vegetables, the fish, the fruit, the meats that we use is all sourced locally. Okay, there's our onion. How does that look? Aitor, can you see that nice and clearly? Aitor is part of our super camera team. I want to join Laura in thanking them for doing such a fantastic job here, because really, I hope you're all getting a sense of what all this looks and smells like, and I hope you're all able to kind of more or less reproduce it. It's a pity I can't see you all, so you can kind of give me a thumbs up or just look panic-stricken. Give us a thumbs up if you're cooking and it's looking okay. Yeah, okay, so it's browning nicely. Okay, so if it's browned nicely, now is the time to add our ginger and garlic, and I'm going to show you a very quick trick here. And to keep an eye on this, all right? I don't want to burn it. I don't want to burn it. I want to keep it nicely browned. Turn the heat down a bit. I've peeled some ginger. I've peeled some garlic, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grate it, okay? I also told you to have this ready. If you didn't have it ready, see how quick it is, easy as pie. So I'm just going to grate it there. And Laura said to me after our presentation of the ingredients last week, she said, oh, you should have shown them how to grate tomato. That was one of my discoveries in Valencia. Okay, so here's what we do with the tomato. So that's the garlic and ginger, okay? We've grated it and we're going to chuck it in there. Probably got more than I need there. I'll save that. And then the tomato, you can also grate. So what we're going to do with the tomato is just on the side here, we're going to grate it. This is a very Spanish thing to do. You just grate the tomato, you see. You end up with the skin in your hand, not the skin of your hand, the skin from the tomato in your hand. And the pulp, you see, comes out all nicely grated. So there it is. So I'm just going to slice those two tomatoes in half and add the pulp to our biryani. Okay, so this is now smelling amazing because first of all, it was just the onion. I've now incorporated the ginger and garlic that I grated. Put your thumbs up if your biryani is beginning to smell truly delicious, because you've added now ginger and garlic. And I always think the smell of ginger and garlic is fantastic. Okay, so there's my grated tomato, which I'm going to add shortly, and I'll explain to you when, because it's not exactly immediately. Okay, let's take our tomato, and we're just going to pop it in a bowl. Try and keep everything tidy, okay? Don't want too much chaos in your work area. In fact, I'm going to put that to one side. And everything nice and tidy. Right, okay, so there we have our nice and spicy, well, not spicy yet, sorry, nice and gingery onion, ginger and garlic. And now is the time to add our spices. I'm going to add whole spices, and I'm going to put them all in, okay? Black cardamom, star anise, coriander, cumin seeds, and cinnamon all go in, whole, as they are. The chilies, I'm just going to splice them in half and toss them in as well. In they go. Everything should be smelling delicious. Curry leaves, in they go. Why did I not put the cardamom in? Because cardamom always tastes much better if you put it on a chopping board. You take your knife very carefully, pointing it slightly downwards, and just give it a smash, okay? And the cardamom pods open up, can you see? And those little black seeds appear, and that's where all the taste is in the cardamom. So now I'm going to toss those in as well. This is smelling fantastic. Okay.
So with the
Now in goes my garam masala, paprika, chili powder, and turmeric. Okay, in they go. There's something very satisfying about getting rid of plates of ingredients because you know you're on to the next stage. Okay, now, oh, It smells divine. What's the problem now? The problem now is that it's very easy for that to burn. So now, just 30 seconds after adding it is the time to add your grated tomato, which strangely enough is exactly what you'd do in a paella. If you were making a paella, you'd put in the pimenton, the paprika, and then before it started to burn and before the garlic started to burn, you put in the tomato, okay? So in goes the tomato. We're just going to let that carry on cooking and caramelizing slightly. And you should now be getting a kind of a divine smell. Sorry, that was a little bowl falling on the floor. Okay, so that's smelling absolutely delicious. I need a very important ingredient, which I've forgotten to get out earlier, which is salt. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to put in a bit of salt there. We're going to stir it all up. How are your biryanis looking?
They have two questions, Steve.
Go for it, louder.
Okay, so the first question is, do we take the whole spices out of the recipe before we serve it?
Ah, that would be very unauthentic.
Okay, so the whole spices stay in. Also, why did we add the whole spices before the ground spices?
We add the whole spices before the ground spices really because they're more resistant to heat. Okay, so in order for them to begin to get aromatic, I used to watch a wonderful program called Madhur Jaffrey's. Did you watch Madhur Jaffrey's Indian cooking school in the 1970s? And I used to love it. I used to watch it with my mum. So I'm just draining the rice here, okay? The rice that we left soaking there. So just strain your rice, take all the water out of it. Well, I used to watch Madhur Jaffrey, and I remember that she always would do that. She would always put in the whole spices and then put in the ground spices, and she'd lean over it and she'd say, and you can just smell it. And I'd be kind of, oh yes, I want to be adopted by Madhur Jaffrey, at which point my mother would look at me slightly askance. But anyway, right, so that was one question. The other one was? To take them out. Yeah. No, you can leave them in. I think sometimes in the restaurant, they say to me, oh, the customers are saying they keep finding things in the food. And I say, well, yeah, that's part of the fun. You know, you should find things in your food. I mean, as long as it's kind of not some, I don't know, a button or something. Okay, so now that the spices have all toasted, the onion, the tomato has begun to caramelize a bit, I'm going to put in the rice. Drained, okay? We don't want any surplus water. We want just the water that it should have. Okay. I'm going to put in the cauliflower, which we've prepared carefully. And I'm just going to mix all that together. We never cook on electricity usually in the restaurant. We cook on this great thing behind me. But in order that you can all see and see what's happening easily, we've put a camera overhead here so that you can watch everything. Right, so that's all nicely covered with spices. Okay. We're just going to let that begin to sing a little bit. It's going to begin to make a little bit of noise, sort of crackling noise. So the rice is just kind of beginning to toast a little bit. That's a good sign. You want that to happen. Because when you pour in the stock now, or the water, you want it to kind of sizzle and bubble, okay? You want it to boil pretty much immediately. So at this stage, your heat should be kind of medium. If it was low before, so as not to burn the spices, it's now medium. Okay. All is good.
Quick question about the water, Steve.
Yeah.
People say when I cook basmati rice at home, I always use double the amount of water. Why are you only using the same amount?
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? Partly because you soak the rice. I always use 1:1 water to rice. I always wash the rice, drain it, and put 1:1 and a tiny bit more. Why haven't I put a tiny bit more here? Because there's a bit of water that comes out of tomato. And also because when I strain the rice, there's a little bit of water that clings to the rice afterwards. So I reckon I've got, if it's 1 part of rice and 1 part of stock or water here, what I'm really adding is 1 part of rice, 1 part of stock, and a little bit more. Okay, but certainly not 2. If you add 2, you'll get mushy rice, guaranteed. Okay, I don't know if you heard that when it went in, but it kind of made a slightly kind of fizzling noise. What I want to do now is bring it up to the boil. I'm going to give it 1 last and very gentle stir because I don't want the rice to break open. But what I'm really going to make sure of is that all those grains on the side that are clinging to the sides of the pot get pushed under. And while that comes up to the boil, I'm just going to have a little taste. Here are my spoons over here. Because I want to make sure now that the taste of the stock has enough salt. So the stock should be as salty as you want the rice to be at the end. So if the stock is not salty enough now, if you don't notice it's kind of, if you feel like it doesn't really have very much taste, then now is the time to add a little bit more salt, okay? Right. So can you see that the rice isn't necessarily all covered, but it doesn't matter because we've got a tight fitting lid. So we're going to pop that tight fitting lid over the top, and we're going to let it boil there. I'll lower the heat a bit because I want it to simmer. I don't want it to boil furiously, and I want it to absorb all of the liquid that I put in there. And I'm going to time it here on my telephone so that it reminds me that in 12 minutes, no, sorry, let's give it a little bit more. We're going to give it 14 minutes today. Why? Because that's the way I feel today. Today, I'm going to give it 14 minutes. Okay, so we'll give it 14 minutes of cooking there. And we're not going to uncover it. We're not going to be tempted to lift the lid and peer. Do not do it. The stock will evaporate, the rice won't absorb it, and it'll end up undercooked. I've just remembered something very important. I didn't put the herbs in. This is what happens when you talk and cook at the same time. I've got a bit of mint and a bit of coriander. And I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit. Whoop, there we go. I didn't lift the lid, honest. There we go. And then it all goes. Right. Okay, so that's our biryani. We can more or less forget about it. The only thing I'm going to keep here is the lemon, because at the end, when we serve it, I'm going to add a little squeeze of lemon over the top. Right, our second dish. Our second dish is the salad. Okay, so I'm just going to ask somebody to come and wash that bowl for me, Robert. So we can make our salad. And let's just run through the ingredients of the salad, okay? Right, so the salad has got crispy shallots. Did you get stuck with crispy shallots? You may have done. Okay, so shall I just show you very quickly how to make them? I think we've got enough time. We've got about 25 minutes still, so. Okay, crispy shallots. These are shallots, okay? They're little baby onions. You can use crispy onions as well if you like. And if you didn't manage to get them and you bought cashew nuts instead, that's fine. Okay, but this is really kind of, if you want to know it for next time, basically to make crispy shallots, you slice the shallots as thinly as you can. Okay. Really thinly, because what we're going to do is we're going to fry them slowly. Okay, and I'm going to carry on slicing shallots because I need also some raw shallots. So I need, for this salad, I need crispy shallots and raw shallots. So I'm going to slice up my shallots. And as I say, this is because we have time.
If we have time, I'm going to ask another question.
You ask questions, Laura. I'm very happy to answer.
Somebody has written, eso es una pregunta en español, pero lo digo en los dos idiomas. The heat under your birmani is low, right? It's moderately low or very low?
It's low.
It's low. Es que es
I've
fuego
just
bajo
lowered it.
ahora. Para los que preguntaron.
Somebody was looking at all that steam coming out and saying, that's not low, that looks pretty high to me.
Y la persona que observó que había mucho humo, pues sí, era un poco demasiado alto.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do something naughty. We didn't do this in the trial, okay? We're going to do this now. Is I'm just going to quickly move that over here so that I can show you meanwhile how we make the biryani. Sorry, the fried shallot. Sorry about this improvisation. Okay, so I had a little saucepan somewhere. What did I do with it? Here. You don't mind this ad-libbing, do you, Laura? It's okay. Okay, so this is our shallot. I'm going to keep half of it as fresh shallot to put into the salad, and the other half, I'm going to show you how to crisp it, okay? So what you do, that's going to be our raw half. And this is going to be our crispy half. So I've got here some sunflower oil. And what I'm going to do, I'm just heating it up, not too much sunflower oil. Be careful because hot oil is very dangerous, okay? So not something to do with small children around. And just drop in there our shallots, okay? And the important thing when you're making crispy onions or crispy shallots is not to fry them too quickly, because the whole point is that in order to become crispy, they need to lose all of their liquid. If you do them very, very quickly, they'll brown on the outside and the inside will still have all of the water in it. So they'll be brown on the outside, but they'll still be soggy on the inside. If you want them to be crispy and crunchy like these ones, where you sort of rub them between your fingers and they turn into a kind of a powder, then what you need to do is to cook them slowly, okay? So can you see, I'm just going to leave those on there and they're just going to kind of toast, not toast, they're going to fry very, very slowly. Can you see there's a few bubbles coming up? And if you see too many bubbles coming up, then somebody shout at me from New Jersey or Valencia or wherever you are, and I'll turn the heat down. I'm going to turn it down a bit now.
Steve, how big a problem is it if the onions burn? What do you do with burnt onions?
Sorry, but if you burn anything, there's no alternative. You have to chuck it out and start again. Can't rescue anything that's burnt, I'm afraid. Okay. While that's cooking, shall I make the pomelo? I showed you how to do this last week, but I'll show you again for those of you who weren't able to do it. Okay. Take your pomelo, slice off the top until you can see fruit all the way around. Okay. So if you slice it like that, you obviously haven't got enough. If you slice it like that, you still haven't got enough because it's not uniformly round. And if you slice it like that, it's just right. This sounds like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Okay. And so once you've got the ends off your pomelo, then you just want to slice with a nice sharp knife. I seem to remember last week we did this with not such a sharp knife. You just want to follow the curve of the fruit around and just take off the skin and take off the pith as well, okay? I'm gonna do a first journey around the pomelo and you'll see that there'll be some pith left. Which we'll take off on a second journey around the pomelo, okay? So that's our first journey around the pomelo. And you can see, yeah, that there's lots of pith left on there. So the idea is to get rid of as much pith as possible. So if you've still got some there, don't worry. Just go around it a second time. If you like, you can turn it over and work from the other side and just refine it, okay? Just take off a little bit more. It doesn't need to be absolutely free of pith. You can have a little bit, but bear in mind that the pith is a bit bitter. Okay. There we go. So that's more or less me pomelo done. And those of you who watched the preparation will remember that we then, can you see those little lines of white there? I don't know if you can manage to appreciate those, but that's between the segments. So with that same sharp knife, we go to one side of that line of pith between the segments, and I cut down all the way to the center. Then I find the next line, and I cut down all the way to the center. And what I'll do is I'll just then take out a whole segment that is free of pith on both sides. Okay, so that's just then really delicious and juicy and just very easy to eat. You're not in a restaurant, so if your segments are not perfect, don't beat yourself up too much about it. But it's a nice technique to learn because actually you can then kind of ring the changes with your salads, and you can put little bits of blood orange or whatever else in it. If you make it with Chinese pomelo, what happens there is the Chinese pomelo, when you separate out the segments, you get very, very thick pith on the outsides of each segment, and you can literally just peel it off with your fingers, and you're left with those, what would you call that in English, Laura? You have a grapefruit, a segment, and then what are the little sort of tadpoles that come out of the segments? Must be a word for it. Okay, answers on a postcard, please.
There's
what are
a
those
question.
called? You've got a whole lot of biologists out there. There must be one who knows something.
That's right. Some biologists give us an answer to
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure there is a word for it.
In the meantime, there's a question: how do I know? All citrus fruit looks wonderful in the store, but how do I know how to pick it out so that it's really going to taste good? Is there a trick?
Yeah, you do all of the things that you're no longer allowed to do. So you pick it up, you give it a little prod, and you smell it, because a grapefruit that's ripe smells of grapefruit, and a grapefruit that's been sitting in a fridge for the last month because it was picked before it was ripe doesn't smell of anything. And in the worst possible case, it'll smell of wax, which is what they've applied to the outside. So yeah, your fruit should smell of fruit. Of course, it's very difficult to smell fruit now because we're not allowed to touch things. But maybe one day that will be allowed again.
And
right,
what do I do with the pith? Do I just throw it
okay,
away?
what do we do with
Are
all
you used to
this?
pith?
That's a very good question. So what do we do with it? Well, I'll tell you what you do with it. There's still quite a lot of juice in it. So just pop it in. That was a segment. We'll pop it into a little sieve. You see, that's the bits of pith and the remains. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it into a sieve and take a spoon and just press it. And you can press all the juice that's left out. And that what's left then is really kind of pretty dry and can go onto your compost heap. Now somebody's going to write in and say, and what do I do with the stuff that's left after you've pressed it? There is a limit to what one can do with leftovers. Okay. So, and can you see how much juice we've got out there? Yeah. So we can just add that to our dressing of the pomelo salad. Okay. I think, do we have time? How are we doing for time? We've got reasonable amount still, yeah? Should I do another one? Just to kind of 15 minutes. Okay, oh, that's fine. We've got plenty of time. Any more questions or doubts coming in from those keen cooks at home? You're probably like me when I'm cooking. I just don't want to be interrupted. So,
basically, could you address some of the ideas of food and nutrition? The people over at the Rutgers School of Environmental and Biological Sciences, that's a big topic that they talk about. So, for example, in a pomelo salad, even I, the English major, know that we have vitamin C. What other kind of nutrients?
Oh gosh, I think it should be you lot telling me that, actually. I'm sorry. I'm just a humble chef. I have very good friendship here with Pilar Luna, who's a doctor of nutrition at one of the local hospitals. And she's very keen on saying to me all the time, Steve, forget about miracle diets and miracle foods. You know, you're not going to cure cancer by eating kale. It's, you know, and there's so much mythology associated with miracle foods. And she's always stressing the importance of a good balanced diet. And I think sometimes we forget actually what a good balanced diet is, but it basically means forget about sugar, which is one of Pilar's very strong points. Try not to eat processed foods. Try to eat plenty of pulses and little meat. Fish, preferably small fish and oily fish, to avoid those sort of heavy metals that accumulate in larger species like tuna. And of course, there's also kind of an environmental question, because in the end, our health doesn't just depend on what we eat, it depends on what we take from the environment. So, you know, would we have a coronavirus pandemic now if we hadn't encroached on lands that put us into closer contact with animals that then, you know, made this sort of, the virus managed to make a jump from one species to another. So, you know, let's be a little bit more careful about how we eat and what we eat. And as long as I think we're eating a balanced diet, obviously there are people with specialist diets who need to be very careful about what they eat. And I'm no expert to be able to advise anybody on what they should or shouldn't eat. But what we try to do, at least in my restaurants, is make sure that people eat in a sustainable way, and that eating is a joyful experience, you know, but without harming the planet and without harming the prospects of somebody else. Can I just take you back to my pomelo here, because, sorry, not to my pomelo, to my shallots here, because I'm conscious of the fact that they are now very nearly done. And the thing about these is when they get to this stage, when they start to go brown, they burn very quickly. So we need to take them to the limit, but without going too far, okay? So I'd say that those are just about there, just about there. Can you see how brown they are? Are they showing up there, I thought? Yeah?
And somebody's concerned about your biryani on the back burner.
Oh, have we done 12 minutes? I've actually been extremely cautious because I've put it on top. I put it on top of the charcoal. So it's actually a really low, gentle heat. So I'm just going to leave it there and forget about it and hope that when we finish, it's cooked. Because of course, that will be the anticlimax of the show when I uncover it and the rice is still raw. So please keep your fingers crossed for me. Okay, so there we have our fried shallots, which I wasn't going to show you, but I have shown you. That's your little extra for today, how to make fried shallots. And these are the same fried shallots that I've got here, okay? But these ones actually look much nicer than those ones. So I'm going to use these ones. And what do I need to do now? The only thing I need to do is to pop them onto a plate with a little bit, excuse me, could I have some, just around the corner there, there's a little bit of paper towel. Papel cheminée. I could have un par de hojas, a few sheets, please.
Another question is, where did you get your knife skills? And how can a—
Where did I get my knife skills? I didn't. As any true chef who's watching me will know, I'm no dab hand. I'm actually a self-taught chef. I never went to chef school. In a previous life, I used to be a physics teacher in South London. And I came to all this sort of cooking thing quite late in life. So, yes, I'm afraid I'm no maestro at cutting and slicing. But basically what I try to do is keep my fingers out of the way, and that's what I'd recommend. I try to keep my fingers out of the way, and I try to keep my knives sharp. And I try when I'm cutting something to cut so that I can't cut myself. Because actually, having been cooking for quite a long time, one of the things I've realized is that it is actually quite easy to cut yourself, and it is pretty painful and a nuisance when you do cut yourself. So I've learned not to cut myself. And of course, now I will cut myself on camera. Right, final thing that I want to prepare before assembling the salad. I'm going to warm up this frying pan because I'd asked you to bring some chickpea flour, okay? And I told you to toast it a little bit. Well, I'm going to toast it for you, okay? So I'm going to warm up my frying pan, and it's really easy to toast chickpea flour. You just drop it into a frying pan, a dry frying pan. Needs to be dry, you don't want it clumping or anything. And I just drop in the chickpea flour into that. Whoops. And I just let it toast slightly. And that's a very, very typical thing to sprinkle over a Burmese salad, which, as I told you last week, what it does is it makes the whole dressing nice and creamy. So let's get on and make the rest of the dressing for the salad. I'm going to take a lime. I'm going to take some ginger. I don't know if I showed you this last week, but when you peel ginger, you can peel it with a spoon, you see? I don't know if you've been shown that trick before, but it's quite handy, a little teaspoon for getting around all those little bumps and lumps that ginger has. And of course, it means then you can give it to, if you have small children, it's something you can give one of your children to do without fear of them cutting themselves. So just with a little teaspoon, I'm going to go around there and peel the end off that ginger. And then, as I did before, I'm going to take my grater. Oh, can you see how the chickpea flour is browning up? Okay, be careful, you don't want it to burn. Don't want anything to burn in this class.
Is there a replacement for chickpea flour, or just grind up chickpeas and brown them?
You can grind up whole chickpeas in a coffee grinder, because that's what it is. Okay, that's as much as I want it to go. Okay, no more than that. Okay, so I'm going to pop that into a little dish, back into its dish. And that's ready for the dressing of our salad. I won't need all of this, but I've done a couple of tablespoons there. Okay, so let's just grate our ginger. Okay. And again, I'm just going to pop it into a sieve. You can already see that it's got lots of liquid in it. Put it over the salad bowl and just press it. And as I press it, can you see how much liquid comes out of it? So that's the liquid that we're going to use to dress our salad. Lovely gingery taste to our salad. Okay. So that's there. Okay, I've also got here. I've got here also a little bit of, sorry, I have to remember to keep myself in vision. I'm going to put a little bit of paper towel there because I've got some sliced cabbage here. I told you last week to use some just ordinary Savoy cabbage or white cabbage. I've actually managed to buy a Chinese cabbage this morning, so I'm using a very finely sliced Chinese cabbage, and I've just washed it in some nice icy water, some water with some ice cubes in it, to make it nice and crisp, okay? And I'm just going to dry off the excess water, squeeze out any excess water, and I'm just going to drop that into our salad. All right. Then I'm going to moisten those little dried prawns that I'd asked you to buy with a little bit of water. Just give them a minute there. Meanwhile, I'm going to take some lovely ripe cherry tomatoes off the vine. I'm going to slice those into quarters, toss them in the salad as well. And I've got some toasted pumpkin seeds here, which I'm going to put in the salad too. I've got half of our crispy shallots, which I'm going to throw in. If you didn't get crispy shallots, then it's the pistachio nuts, I think we said. Our pomelo, which of course we can't forget about. And now here's something useful. If you've made the crispy shallots yourself and you still have a little bit of the leftover oil, which I've got here, I'm trying to remember which one it is, it's this one, then this shallot oil is actually perfect for dressing the salad, okay? So I'm just going to pour a little bit of shallot oil over that, a little squeeze of lime juice, some fresh shallots as well, a little bit of fish sauce. Laura, you talked about the first export from Valencia 2,000 years ago being Roman fish sauce. Garum, it was called, wasn't it? Garum. So garum was actually the Roman version of what in Southeast Asian food they call nampla in Thailand, which is fermented fish sauce. It's the same thing. Okay, so there is our salad. I'm going to put in a little pinch of that chickpea flour just to make the oil and the lime come together into a nice kind of creamy, almost mayonnaise-y sort of texture. And I'm going to hold back with a few leaves of coriander, just here. Get rid of all of this. Tidy up a little bit. A few leaves of coriander. Now, if you're using your dried prawns, just drain off any excess liquid. I'm just going to give them a little pound here in my pestle and mortar. If you're vegetarian or vegan, just don't use them, okay? I'm just going to smash them up a bit. I actually love the flavor of these little dried prawns, and I'm going to toss those in as well. That's a very, very Burmese taste. All these umami tastes are very Burmese. And let's plate up. So the best tool for plating up always are your hands, I'm afraid. There is no alternative. So that's our pomelo, Burmese pomelo salad. Very refreshing. And I'm not sure what vitamins and so on it's got in it, Laura, but I'm sure it's extremely healthy. Okay. And the only thing we need to finish that off is a little bit more chopped shallot, a little bit more chickpea flour, a little dusting, and a few strategically placed coriander leaves. Okay. So while you're having a little look at that and admiring your own salads, there we go. I'm going to take all this away so we can have a look at how our rice is doing.
Where do you source the dried prawns, Steve?
Now, there are things that don't come locally, and the dried prawns are sourced from an Asian supermarket. So they are an import. Confession. But having said that, there's no reason at all why in Spain we can't use camarones, because camarones are very typical as well in southern Spain. In fact, tortas de camarón, which is a traditional dish in Cádiz, I was very, very surprised to see that when I was going from Mandalay down to Bagan in Burma, a group of local women got on the boat and they had baskets on their head and they were selling tortas de camarón. and they were chickpea flour with camarones, and it was exactly as if they'd come straight out of Cadiz. Right, let's see what's happening here. The moment of truth. I'm in danger here of, sorry, gonna have to go off camera for a second. So I don't want my surface to crack. Shall I do it? Oh, it looks pretty good to me. Smells divine. Okay, so we've got our lovely biryani here. Let's just see whether the rice is cooked. Oh yes, it's flaking up nicely. That's what we want. Let me just have a little taste. Do you know, I think I would go as far to say it's better than it was last week. Would you allow me to say that? Laura, you're going to be taking it home again, I think. If you like it, if you don't have to, but a little squeeze of lemon is nice.
Happy to help, Steve.
Let's just plate up a portion so you can see what it looks like on the plate. Sorry. Rub your hands. And you can see I said it was enough for two. You can see that's a pretty generous two, isn't it? And you see what's nice, if you go down there, can you see it's just beginning to crisp up underneath? Now that in Valencia is very much admired, and it's called socarat. When you have a paella, which catches slightly on the paella pan, that little burnt bit is considered to be the best bit. So let's just make sure that that's really nice on the plate. And without making a kind of huge fuss about chutneys and what have you, you can actually just put a spoonful of yogurt on the top of that, just a spoonful of natural yogurt, not strawberry yogurt, but unsweetened natural yogurt will go very, very nicely with that. And actually, I'm a real fan of lime pickle. So if you've got a well-sourced lime pickle, or maybe in another program, we'll show you how to make one. Yeah. Burmese pomelo salad, cauliflower biryani. How did yours turn out?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Steve. Yeah.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot. Gracias.
Thanks.